As everyone settles down here, I'm going to go ahead and start teeing Don up for his presentation. As I said before, Dr. Ballestero sort of gave us the global view, and then we're going to bring it down back towards Wolfeboro in the second half of the program. So Don Kretchmer, if you do not know him, is a principal at DK Water Consulting. He's a certified lake manager with 28 years of experience as a limnologist, specializing in water quality, freshwater aquatic ecology, and fisheries. His work involves aquatic ecosystem restoration and watershed management, environmental policy and natural resource assessment, and the design and implementation of lake monitoring and restoration plans. Through his career, Don has helped citizens, advocacy groups, state and federal agencies, private industry, public utilities, and research universities. Don and his wife, Teresa, and his daughter, Mary, who I know because I coach her in skiing. I hope she's not here. I'm probably embarrassing her. Are longtime residents of Wolfeboro and the Wentworth watershed. So also Don informs me that he's on way too many committees, and so if anyone wants to help him out on that front, I think it was a cry for help in the intermission here. So anyway, Don, why don't you come on up and give him a round.
Howdy, folks. So Tom pretty much answered everything, so I think I'm just going to take questions. Now, I appreciate the warm words at the beginning of the session and that Sam just gave. Anne brought this idea actually to the fore several years ago. She kept talking to me about it. Little did I know that I was going to be on the program. That kind of evolved over time. But I'm happy to do it. This is a community I live in. I work here. My office is right down the street. And I recreate here. I mean, the water is integral to why I'm here and integral to why a lot of us are here. And I'm going to talk about some of our water resources issues and challenges and maybe some solutions going forward and some things to think about. So with these 4 topics, which is kind of after a lot of committee meetings, we came down to kind of 4 topics related to water that we would try to discuss during this forum. I should be able to get through this stuff by Mother's Day dinner, which is sometime tomorrow. Now, honestly, I'm going to try to go pretty quick. With any talk like this, there's just no way to cover everything. And there's going to be a lot of unanswered questions. And we envision this session as kind of the first of perhaps many sessions. And if there's issues that keep coming up that we didn't cover, let us know about it, and we'll figure out a way to cover it and get the right experts here and have a session about that in the future. As well, I think the panelists that are coming after me are going to be able to answer some of these questions as well. So recreation. Let's just talk in general about Wolfeboro. We have an abundance of high-quality water. It's part of our identity. It's why we are here. It's also the cornerstone of our tourist-based economy. If we didn't have the lakes, we would not be the oldest summer resort in America. We wouldn't be a summer resort at all. So it's really kind of contingent on, it's important for all of us to take care of them. The desirability of visiting and living in Wolfeboro is related to our high-quality water resources. I don't think any of us can argue with that. It doesn't matter what political stripe you come from, what your view is. Wolfeboro would not be Wolfeboro without our high-quality water. It's everyone's playground. Everyone comes up here, and for those of you who are seasonal residents, versus permanent residents, the permanent residents should be flattered that people save up all year for their 2-week vacation to be your neighbor. That's how important these resources are for people. The future. This was predicted back in 1910. I ran across this postcard from Alan Stevens' collection. With the exception of the submarine and maybe the Zeppelin, pretty much everything else happens here. And it could very well be that we have submarines as well. But it's amazing that 100 years ago, more than 100 years ago, they predicted what it would look like here off of the town docks on a busy day. Most people live or visit here by choice, and water's a big part of that. We choose to live here. I choose to live here. I've lived a bunch of different places. Of all the places I lived, we've chosen to live here people choose to recreate here, and there's a reason for that, and that's because we've got a really, really nice community and some really nice water resources. So the question is, how do we live here without destroying what we live here for? You know, how do we exist in this environment without making it worse for ourselves and for everybody else? And that's the challenge that we have. Because as the song goes, you don't know what you've got until it's gone. And I wasn't going to say this till the end, but I'll say it now. All of the pictures that I'm going to show today are all in Wolfeboro. So these aren't, you know, slides from outside. I'm bringing it back home. They are meant as illustrations of problems. I think all of us will see similarities on our own property or on other properties, the things that I'm showing here. We're not trying to, this is not a witch hunt to have people try to figure out, hey, oh, that's so-and-so, they're the problem. We all have a part to play in this, and there are numerous examples. These are just examples. I've tried to disguise them. You may recognize your own property in here. If so, take it with the spirit with which I'm giving it. It's just an example. You are not the only one, I will guarantee. So I'm going to start off talking about water supply. Our water supply is Upper Beach Pond. And, you know, basically the way it travels is from Upper Beach Pond to the water treatment facility, to the water tower, to our tap. And that's how pretty much everyone in the downtown core gets their water. Upper Beach Pond, as Tom mentioned, is not in our watershed, you know, our watershed, the Winnipesaukee watershed. It's over, that goes down in through the Ossipee and Saco River Basin and ends up in the ocean. But we transfer that water here and then and use it. The other way we get water is from individual wells. People on individual wells may say, well, why do I care about, you know, what's happening at the municipal level with water? Well, a lot of wells went dry last year. The municipal system may eventually be expanded to accommodate some of those folks whose wells went dry. Clearly, we can't have individual wells here in downtown. We need a municipal system. We need the municipal area to keep the economy going here. So it's really, really important that we take care of both pieces of it. We've had problems. I don't know if many of you can probably remember, we had water bans. We were close to running out of water for a number of years in a row. Since then, the Public Works Department has tightened up a lot of the system. But the reality is, Upper Beach Pond hasn't gotten any bigger. It's the same size it was back then. Even though we've tightened it up, we may not be able to accommodate a great amount of growth in town with that water supply. So we may need to think about other things, other water supplies to meet our needs if we're going to grow. So what if we run out of water in Upper Beach Pond, or Upper Beach Pond can't be used? You know, heaven forbid we had an algal bloom up there, or had some problems with the water quality up there. What are our choices here in Wolfeboro? We could pick another lake. We've got about 16 or 17 water bodies in town. Or we could drill a well. This is the one along the Bridge Falls path. I would say that it'd probably take a Public Works Department person, you know, full time at least to pump enough water out of that to make a difference. But no, it would probably not look quite like that. But we could drill a well. So let's just talk about the first option. You know, let's talk about what it would mean. Some of the implications of using an alternative source, a different body of water. Right now, that little red dot is the watershed area for Upper Beach Pond. Wolfeboro owns a good deal of that watershed and protects it. I'll talk a little bit more about what they're doing, what we have going for planning up there. But it's pretty small, and it's pretty easy to keep track of what's going on in that watershed. And everything in that watershed affects what the water quality is in Upper Beach Pond. Let's say, for example, we decided Lake Wentworth was going to be our water supply. We got a lot bigger area to take care of now. Everything that happens inside that yellow line is going to be something that is of potential concern to the water supply. Let's suppose we said Lake Winnipesaukee. All of a sudden, things that are happening in other towns across the lake, way up in Sandwich, all those things are in our water supply now. we don't have a lot of control over what goes on in a lot of those areas. It's really, really difficult to maintain water supply in that situation. So that's a challenge. Let's talk about protective zones. Let's suppose we put it, and this is strictly a random spot I picked out in Wolfeboro Bay off of Clark Point. But let's suppose that we decided, okay, we're going to put an intake in Lake Winnipesaukee. I put in a couple of restrictive zones based on other water bodies that I've worked on. So this is a couple hundred feet, this small circle here. And that's roughly equivalent to what they have on Paugus Bay for Laconia. This one is a quarter mile. So that's what Sunapee has. There's no swimming within a quarter mile of their intake. So that would affect a number of people. And there's also the question of whether or not you want boats, cruising around over the top of your intake. This one out here is Sebago Lake. No contact recreation within 2 miles of the intake. No swimming at all. That would obviously cover all of Wolfeboro. It's a consideration. I mean, we can set the level with consultation with DES as to what we think is protective, but there's some real considerations there. There are other water bodies like Massabesic Lake down in Manchester, or just outside of Manchester, where there's no swimming at all in the whole lake. They allow boating in half the lake and no boating in the other half where the intakes are. So there's a lot of options here, but there are things to think about. I'm going to talk just briefly about groundwater. I've heard the argument, well, we'll just put a well in, and we'll be covered. I noticed that there were some geologists in the crowd, including Tom, who's a geologist in his spare time. Anyway, we've got a few stratified drift aquifers, and stratified drift aquifers are areas that are potentially favorable for groundwater well production. Unfortunately, a number of the ones that we have are fairly thin. As we found out just recently, there was a major development proposed over one of the stratified drift aquifers, and they couldn't find enough water. They couldn't find enough water for this one building. They certainly would not be able to have enough water. There certainly would not be enough water there for municipal purposes. So a number of the other ones are already developed. There's things on land uses and things happening over these stratified drift aquifers that would probably not be compatible with using them for water supply. So there's some questions there. And these areas are not large. We don't have an abundance of groundwater resources here. Unlike some of our neighboring communities like Ossipee and Freedom, where there's very deep groundwater deposits, we just don't have that here in Wolfeboro. So it's a limited option, but it's an option. So let's just talk briefly about, sort of water supply issues. Will this limit growth in Wolfeboro? We talked about watershed protection. They're multiplied when we use other lakes. We may have restricted areas. We may have large infrastructure costs. As you recall, as you may know, our treatment plant for water is up at Upper Beach Pond. If we use one of the lakes, we're going to have to either pump water up to that treatment plant and then bring it back down, or build a new treatment plant down near the lake. Probably expensive. And I talked a little bit about groundwater. I'm going to try to keep us back, or get us back close to on time here, so I'm going to gloss over a few things. I'm going to switch gears here to wastewater. We have in town an award-winning wastewater plant. Just recently, DES gave us a commendation for our remarkable changes in treatment and the way our plant is operated. We're doing really well on treating the wastewater. What we've been struggling with over the years is what do we do with it once we treat it? And we don't treat it to a standard that we could just throw it in a lake. We're still probably 100 times higher than what we would like to see in the lake. Historically, we store it in the pond up above Abenaki, that's Abenaki ski area, and we sprayed it in the woods. That has not been sufficient at times to meet all of our needs. We haven't been able to get rid of all the water that way. We've, in the last few years, switched to these rapid infiltration basins, which rapidly push the water into the groundwater. There's been problems. and it hasn't worked perfectly. I think the town staff is working as diligently as possible to fix this problem. But I think that probably the bottom line here is that we don't have a huge amount of excess capacity here in town. Once we fix these, it isn't like we can all of a sudden put in 3 times the wastewater that we have now. It's going to be a constraint. Everyone else is on septic systems, and I'm going to talk about those in just a minute. So some of the issues with wastewater issues, we do not have a large river to assimilate our waste. Most other communities have a river that they can dump into, and rivers have a capacity to assimilate a lot of waste. Treated wastewater, not raw wastewater like we used to do. We can't throw it in the lakes. We have to deal with it within our town, and there's limited options for doing that. On-site septic systems, they're probably not the answer for large users, and part of that reason is that 5 to 15% of the phosphorus load to our lakes, the amount of phosphorus, which is what grows the green stuff in our lakes, is probably from septic systems. Big septic systems have to be in pretty well-drained areas that can accommodate a lot of groundwater. Those happen to be also the stratified drift aquifers that we might want to use for water supply. So the best spots for septic systems might also be the places where we want for water supply. There's obviously a conflict there. All right, I'm going to go over to stormwater. I can probably skip over a few things here because Tom handled them. Stormwater, we kind of know what that is, so I'm not going to go a lot into the definition. But what is in stormwater? Nutrients, metals, bacteria, oil and grease, road salt, soil. All these things are in stormwater. They're all things that we don't necessarily want in our lakes. These 2 slides, one of them is Fernal Brook after a rain event, and this is the beginnings of a fix for this problem. This was taken Wednesday by Rich Massey. We're building a best management practice to try to fix this problem that happens after a lot of rainstorms. So I'm going to talk about phosphorus. Since I can't talk about everything, I'm going to focus on phosphorus. It's the most important nutrient in lakes. It's also the middle number on a bag of fertilizer. The Scott's company removed phosphorus from fertilizer, from common lawn fertilizer a few years ago. Scott's is available pretty widely. I would argue if you have to fertilize at all, make sure the middle number on the bag of fertilizer you're using is 0. That's the phosphorus number. And I'll show you why in just a second here. Too much phosphorus grows algae and aquatic plants. Too much algae can reduce water clarity, deplete dissolved oxygen, may result in blooms of toxic algae. The same stuff that makes your lawn green makes the lake green. Same exact stuff. This is how we kind of figured this out as scientists. The only difference between these 2 sides of the lake is one side has phosphorus in it, the other side didn't. This is a lake that was split in half in Canada. This is the phosphorus side. Which side would you want to swim in? Probably that one. Not being content with what's happening in Canada, my daughter and I did an experiment with Wentworth water. The only difference between these 2 are that this one doesn't have any phosphorus fertilizer, that one does. Pretty clear demonstration that phosphorus makes the difference. And this was just 2 weeks in a windowsill. Just to sort of illustrate that we're not immune here, across the Northeast we've had blooms of, in recent years, a great increase in the number of blooms of a species of blue-green algae or cyanobacteria called Glia Trachea. And to its friends, we call it glio. You can actually see it, and then you may have noticed that there are little furry balls in the lake in the middle of the summer. This was a bloom that I witnessed out in the Broads of Winnipesaukee in the middle of the summer. This bloom happens every year. It happens on Lake Wentworth every year. Some years it's worse than others. Last year it wasn't as bad as it was the year before. The year before it was quite thick. The thing with glio is that it's often not toxic, but sometimes it is. And we don't really know when it is or when it isn't. So it's something that, Dr. Haney down at UNH has been looking at. He gave a presentation up here last last summer on Glia Trachea and some other cyanobacteria that are even worse. Suffice to say, it's something that we probably don't want to, risk having a lot more of. So the eutrophication is nutrient enrichment. It also can grow unwanted aquatic plants, and that's milfoil and back bay. It can turn a lake that's well balanced into a green pool. So how has the water quality changed? I did a survey a number of years ago on Lake Wentworth, and this was kind of an illustrative slide. I wanted to know how bad things were, and we asked people who'd been on the lake for up to 80 years. People have been there their whole life. Is the water quality, simple question, is it better or worse than when you were a kid? And about 60% said that it was worse. Very, very few, about 5%, thought it was better. Clearly, there's a perception that things have changed and things aren't as good as they used to be. Well, not being content with just what people thought of it, I looked back at some of the data. And these are our local water bodies. Much of this data was collected by volunteers. Winnipesaukee, this is just phosphorus concentrations, increasing. Mirror Lake, increasing. And so the phosphorus on these slides are the green line. Lake Wentworth, increasing. Maybe a little lower in the last couple of years. We've done some watershed planning and we're doing some things. I don't know that we see that effect yet, but still, overall increasing. Crescent Lake, increasing. Rust Pond, decreasing, at least by the long-term trend. It's decreasing. It was not that great back in the 90s, and I think there was a lot of development that happened there. And Rust Pond has also done a bunch of watershed work. So where's the phosphorus come from? Tom talked about impervious surfaces. This is a picture of downtown. Where does all the water from downtown go? It goes down the drains. Where do those drains go? I asked this at the high school a couple weeks ago. Everyone said, well, it goes to the treatment plant. Well, it really doesn't. It goes directly to the lake. All of those drains go directly to the lake. All of them in downtown, all the way down the street here, directly to the lake, no treatment. So whatever ends up on the street ends up in the lake without any treatment. And it's incumbent on us to think about ways to fix that, to retrofit the infrastructure to get water to go into the ground rather than run directly into the lake. It comes from land disturbance. This is the same site in both panels, kind of a before and after. Comes from non-natural ground cover. There's 8 to 12 times more phosphorus comes off of a lawn than a wooded area. Septic systems, particularly when they're failing, when they're flooded out. This is a failure in a local lake. This is a nice sandy beach with a big green patch in the middle of it where the septic system was breaking out. No surprise, it grew a lot of plants. There's a lot of fertilizer in septic. Waterfowl, anybody ever seen those on their beach? Loss of shoreline buffers. This is one that we've actually fixed down at Albee Beach. But the phosphorus coming off of this side, where there's no buffer, is much less than what's coming off of this side, which has a natural buffer. Loss of understory in the shorefront buffers. What happens when you get rid of all those plants, the low plants, and plant grass underneath the big trees, is you end up with shallow roots that aren't anchored very well. Grass has really not got much for roots to anchor plants. You get a windstorm, things blow down, and the buffer's gone. Eroding roads and ditches and trails. Many, many examples of that every time we have a big rainstorm. All of these, well, at least this one and that one I took last week. This one's from a couple years ago, but it's happening, it's still happening. Oops, I think I went too far. Talk about movement of sediment in streams. Here's a couple of deltas that are at the base. This one's Willie Brook, and this one is Fernal Brook. This is some of the processes that Tom talked about with streams eroding and incising. We see that where that sediment ends up is in the lakes downstream, ultimately. And with that sediment comes a lot of nutrients and comes a lot of phosphorus, as well as just the making absolutely perfect ground for invasive aquatic plants to grow. Shallow, new soil, they say, oh boy. So similar to is water quality getting worse, the survey also said that almost everybody thought that watershed development, shorefront building, loss of shorefront vegetation were making things worse in recent years. And we can do better than that. So this is kind of a quick, I'm going to show just a quick slide. This is a build out that we did when we did the Lake Wentworth Watershed Management Plan. These are the number of buildings we have right now in Wolfeboro. And I'm going to go through this really quickly, so everyone pay attention. The black ones are the ones that are going to be built. And this is only based on current zoning and current growth projections. This is 2043, 2062, and 2110. So potentially, we could have an awful lot of building here. We could have an awful lot of things happening in our watershed. We need to do it really smartly if we're going to do it. Or we need to think about how much we can really accommodate. I guarantee that this level of building would probably have a big impact on what our lakes look like. If you think about this density of building, a lot of the lakes in Massachusetts, I'm sorry if I offend anybody down there, have this density of building. Where do those people go for vacation? They come here because their lakes aren't very good anymore. So anyway, that's the issue. So we want to keep the left panel from becoming the right panel. So what kind of things can we do? Infiltrate, don't run off. And this is something that we're going to hammer home, and this is kind of my take-home message, which is very similar to Tom's. We want to filter water through soil, organic matter, and native plants, and avoid this direct runoff, which carries sediment and nutrients to lakes. Stencils on storm drains. People need to know. What you dump in that storm drain goes directly to the lake. Rain gardens. This is one that Public Works put in, and the garden club takes care of right over next to the boat launch in Back Bay. It doesn't have to be an ugly thing. This is a beautiful garden, and it functions as a rain garden. It takes water off the parking lot and infiltrates it. Infiltration structures. This one's out behind Bartlett. This is one that the Lake Wentworth Association was instrumental in getting put in. Pervious pavement up at the high school. This side of the parking lot is impervious, and all the parking spaces are pervious. The water flows right down through it. Water quality monitoring. We need to continue to know how well we're doing here. When are things going bad? We need to know before they go bad, and I'll talk about that in just a second. But recognize that almost all the monitoring that's done in any of our lakes is done by volunteers, with the exception of Upper Beach Pond. The town does that. But it's almost all done, but this is a volunteer-driven effort. We got to keep up the work. Stabilizing ditches, either with riprap where it's steep, which is the rock, or with long vegetation. Sorry, I just got a little too close there. This is just an accident. This ditch happened to be so wet they couldn't mow it, but it's exactly the right thing to do. Keep the grass longer in the ditches. It slows down the water, it drops out the sediments, and it takes up more of the nutrients. Waterfowl, there's a bunch of things you can try. This is what we've tried on our beach, fencing. You know, this is our neighborhood beach. That's a fake coyote. Signage. But actually, probably the best solution is doing nothing. This is a natural buffer. Waterfowl, if they can't walk out of the water onto land or onto a grassed area, they won't because they're afraid of predators. They won't walk out through this. If you keep your shorefront natural, you're not going to have geese problems. If they can walk out onto a lawn, you're going to have them. Gravel road maintenance. There's a number of manuals out there on how to take care of your camp road, your driveway, the Class 6 roads, the town gravel roads. Conservation-minded planning and zoning. Put the development where it's not near the sensitive resources is the bottom line there. Wetland protection. This is one of my favorite slides. This is data that I've collected for 15 years here on Lake Wentworth. This was taken upstream of this wetland complex, which is Heath Brook. This is the compilation of a lot of data. We have phosphorus concentrations of about 50. When you get halfway through that wetlands complex, we're down to 10. Once you get to Lake Wentworth, we're down to about 6. Hugely beneficial. Protecting that wetland is absolutely critical to keeping Lake Wentworth pure. And likewise, any of the wetlands around any of our water bodies are absolutely critical. So watershed planning is kind of the way we get to some of this stuff. And it answers these questions. How much phosphorus can the lakes and streams take? What areas are contributing now? Can we fix them? Which ones do we fix first? How much will it cost? What solutions are working and what aren't working? Which subwatersheds should we protect? What's the impact of proposed future projects on the lakes downstream? Let's suppose a big subdevelopment was proposed. We often have modeling that goes along with our watershed plans. We can run these scenarios through the model. If we develop this subwatershed, what's the lake going to look like? These are really, really important tools to make informed decisions. These are places where we have watershed plans in town. Wentworth Crescent, Mirror Lake, Rust Pond has the north end. Winter Harbor has a very small section. The rest of the town, no watershed plans in place. That includes Upper Beach Pond, our water supply, all the shores of Winnipesaukee, or Sergeant's Pond, and many of the smaller ponds as well. I'm not going to go through this because there's a bunch of solutions here that I already talked about. Disconnect impervious cover is one that Tom talked about, really, really important. So what if things go badly? I've got like 2 more slides here, and then I think we can get into to the last part of the program. So if things go badly for our water resources, lake water quality declines. The solutions cost a lot of money. Property values drop on the lake. Recent work by the New Hampshire Lakes Association said that could be 15 to 20% drop for a meter lost in clarity. So 3 feet loss in clarity of the lake, which isn't that, that's not that much compared to what we have. We have maybe 15 feet of clarity on most days. Losing 3 feet, you can lose 15 to 20% of your property value. That decreases the tax base, which is actually how we fund this town, is the lakefront property. And if the tax base drops on the lakefront property, everyone else's taxes goes up because the rate has to go up. Tourists don't show up, local businesses suffer, and probably even almost as important is we just don't like it here anymore. We might decide to move someplace where the lakes are better. So can't we just fix the problems when they happen? Isn't there something, if they get messed up, let's deal with it then. So these are things that I always like to say to groups like this. The solutions, once a problem is in a lake, the solutions are not easy. They're not inexpensive. The bigger the lake, usually the more expensive they are and the more difficult it is. It may take a very long time to fix it. It might have taken us decades to get to this point. It might take us decades to get back. Success is not guaranteed. There are lakes that despite spending millions of dollars, we haven't been able to fix. It is much, much easier to preserve water quality through thoughtful action now than to fix it later. So what are our future scenarios here? What can we do here in town? We got a few choices. We could stay small. We could stay just like we are, freeze it in time. Even that might not be enough because we've already got some stormwater issues. And water quality is already, as we've shown, start heading down the wrong trend. We can grow thoughtfully while still preserving our high quality water, or we can grow without forethought and hope to react to problems as they come up. That's probably not a great path to take because we may not be able to react quick enough, and we may not be able to fix it. So my final slide is think about what you put on your land because it might end up in your water. And I guess that the message here is that everyone can do something on their own property. We all live in a watershed, and almost all of us live in a watershed that drains to one of our lakes. We can all do something. And maybe you saw something on these slides. There's lots of other guidance out there as to what you can do on your individual property. And that will probably be the subject of some of the follow-up sessions that we have. So with that, I'll stop here. Our panelists, who have a lot of knowledge on sort of what we're doing locally, are going to come up next.
So here's how this next part works. We can have the panelists sort of filter up. There are question cards that perhaps you grabbed one on your way in. Perhaps you'd like to get one. You can write down a question you'd like to ask the panel. We'll have a runner or two going around to pick up the cards. They'll bring them up to me, and I'll sort of read them off after I've got a few of my own questions I'm going to sort of prime the pump with. Maybe we could give the runner some cards that some blank cards that they could take around too, so that if you don't have one, someone can hand it off to you. The panel does not include Don Kretchmer or Tom Ballestero. We can have them up if the panel is unable to answer one of the questions. But I think the idea was that we want to have your local officials taking the questions so that they can talk about how they are sort of working with the information that you have heard today and how that affects their jobs. So I'm going to go sort of across, sort of jumping around here to introduce everyone who's up here so you can know perhaps who to direct a question to in case you don't know someone who's up here. It's a broad swath of expertise on the stage. So we have Dan Coons, chair of the Wolfeboro Conservation Commission, which is charged with protecting the natural resources of the town. Their job is to advise DES, the Planning Board, the Board of Selectmen on wetland issues. In his private work, he works for Lex Wetland Wetland Consultants, which is an environmental consulting firm located within the Lakes region that provides services throughout the state. They use a combination of field studies, technological analysis to assist clients ranging from homeowners, landowners, and developers to municipalities, engineering firms, regulatory officials, and management bodies that are seeking regulatory and legal relief. Their job is to assist and balance the need of both ecosystems and development while doing it in a cost-effective and beneficial manner. So that's Dan Coons. We have Pat Tarpey, who is the executive director of the Lake Winnipesaukee Association. She's been involved with lake-related issues in the Winnipesaukee watershed for the past 10 years. Some of those past activities and projects include the team leader of the Winnipesaukee Watershed AmeriCorps program, coordinator of the Lake Host program on Lake Winnipesaukee, project manager for the tributary monitoring in the Winnipesaukee watershed project, and coordination of the water quality monitoring effects on the Big Lake. In 2010, she helped to create the Winnipesaukee Watershed Management Plan. She then worked to implement that plan, and this all culminated in 2012 with her being hired as the executive director of the Winnipesaukee Watershed Association. We have Matt Sullivan, who is a new face, I hear. He is not yet your town planner, but is scheduled to start the new role on November 16th. Matt has been the senior planner at the SRPC, which is the Stratford Regional Planning Commission for the past 5 years. At the commission, he served as project manager for the HUD Sustainable Communities Program, a regional master planning program that includes development of the SRPC Fair Housing and Equity Assessment Program. He's been involved with brownfields assessment, and he co-authored the Durham Master Plan, which was awarded Plan of the Year in 2015. He started last November. Excuse me. I'm here. This is present tense. Yeah, I'm sorry. That's my fault. I'm sorry, folks. So he served as town planner for the town of Northwood, and he described this as a rare opportunity to be both the director of planning and director of development here. Dave Ford is your public works director. He has a BS in civil engineering from Worcester Polytechnical Institute. As director of public works, he's responsible for a total yearly operations budget of $6.3 million, which includes roads, town vehicles, waste and recycling, buildings and grounds, water, sewer. He leads a staff of 31 dedicated, hardworking municipal employees. He's responsible for the implementation of 80 capital projects with a budget authorization of over $30 million since 2006. And as you heard, your wastewater treatment facility was recently awarded Plant of the Year Award and was cited in the US EPA's case studies on implementing low-cost modifications to improve nutrient reduction in wastewater treatment plants. Of the 12 plants studied, Wolfeboro's was the only one in New England, so something to be proud of there. Bob Cole. Oh. Wow. Bob Cole is the executive director of the Wentworth Watershed Association. He was appointed January 20th of 2017. after serving 2 years on the Lake Wentworth Foundation Board. The mission of that organization is to protect and preserve community, natural resources, water quality, scenic beauty of the Lake Wentworth and Crescent Lake watershed, as well as to promote knowledge of the enduring character of the woodlands, waterways, wildlife, people, and history of that area. He assisted in reuniting the Lake Wentworth Association and the Lake Wentworth Foundation into one strong organization, the Lake Wentworth Watershed Association. He's the son of Donald and Susan Cole, who were Governor's Shore summer residents on Lake Wentworth since 1958, raised and educated at Phillips Exeter Academy, but cites the YMCA, Camp Belknap, and Tuftonboro as the institution that most shaped his leadership skills and conservation ethic. So, that's your panel. I'm going to sort of kick this off with a question for each of you that I'd like you, and we've got those microphones. I'd prefer if you pick those up as opposed to relying on the floor mics. But maybe we could just go sort of, maybe start left to right here. So given what we've all heard today, I'm sure none of this is news to you all, water professionals. From your particular point of view, in your place where you are operating, how are you, or what are the solutions that you're taking up to deal with these challenges that we've heard about all today?
My role in the Conservation Commission, we look for land protection as an important role here, to protect those upper areas of the watershed, the riparian areas, other valuable properties, wetlands, that sort of thing, which we can hopefully influence the water flow downstream, reduce phosphorus inputs that are helping with our lake quality.
Well, at Public Works, we're doing quite a bit. And I kind of explained when I've been to the group meetings, when I'm an engineer, I'm an environmental engineer by trade, and our focus was on the wastewater facility, making sure we get the dirty water treated and discharge it properly. On clean water, making sure we provide safe drinking water to everyone. And when it came to drainage, it was just a part of roads. We had the road infrastructure is important. We rebuild it. Drainage is important to support the road, and we want that drainage to get into the pipes and out to the lake as quick as possible. But that was our mentality up to about maybe a dozen years ago when we started realizing, wait a second, our important water resources are under threat by stormwater and the need for stormwater treatment. So lately we have been doing projects, and they kind of mentioned it in Don's presentation, but at the back of the room against the windows we have a couple of posters that will be installed down at Bean Park, which is right by the boat landing by the railroad station. And those are two projects in which we are implementing these types of stormwater treatment by infiltration. And while these are very small projects and only take a little area, it really is, it's been death by 1,000 cuts. It wasn't all one big project, and it's not going to be one big solution. It's going to be a lot of little solutions, and we, as a town, are trying to take that lead by doing these type of projects. And even right now, under construction, working with the association, we have her over at the Auto Care Plus site, where a private owner has worked with the association and the town in a stormwater treatment system, a BMP, that's being installed as we speak now. Another project is at Mass Landing, where a lot of you who do access the lake, you do come in through Mass Landing. And at the boat ramp, we have got that all ripped up. It's a project that we started last year with engineering, and this year we're under construction with Integrity Earthworks, a really good local contractor, designed by comprehensive environmental engineers, and it's going to show multiple BMPs, and we're going to have posters at the end of the project which explain how they work between the porous pavement and porous block pavers and rain gardens. And the hope is that we all get that message and what we all can do on the municipal level, but also on the private level. So we've been pretty busy.
For the Lake Winnipesaukee Association, if you remember Don's slide showing the watershed, it's quite large. And so we have been focused a lot on doing watershed management planning and working with the municipalities at the local level and at a sub-watershed level. So we have completed watershed management plans for Meredith Bay, Paugus Bay, Sanders Bay, partial one for Center Harbor, We're wrapping one up for Wolfeboro Bay Inlet right now, and we were just awarded a grant for Wolfeboro Bay, which will include a little bit of Wolfeboro. And we're going to try and incorporate the Winter Harbor area in that next planning phase. So we've been going around the lake working with those local municipalities because their interest is that area and raising their awareness. But the other piece that I want to emphasize is the watershed is large and it's made up a lot of individual properties, and everybody does have that role. And sometimes we get feedback or pushback. People think it's a shorefront. It's not. It's everybody in the watershed because it all flows downstream and ends up there. So we all contribute.
Thank you. Like Dave in the Public Works Department, the Planning Department is fortunate to have an excellent regulatory toolkit in place already that I have to say, as someone who just recently arrived, I can take zero credit for. But I was really encouraged by Tom's talk today because a lot of the things, whether it be nitrogen, phosphorus, total suspended solids, a lot of those things were actually already working into our regulatory process for both private landowners as well as commercial developments, multifamily developments, and site plan developments. And that's really great for us. I think one of the critical issues, not to get too far ahead here on my talk, but one of the critical issues is really communicating these things to landowners as they seek to take advantage of their property. But our goal is really to identify that these are shared values that the community holds and educate them on the fact that these regulations represent sort of the manifestation of those shared values when it comes to the community of Wolfeboro.
So the Wentworth Watershed Association has been very busy in the last year, and I might just point to two specific things. Obviously, you're all here because we wanted to work hard in a partnership with businesses and town officials, citizens, and nonprofits to build partnerships that strengthen our ability and our capacity to do various projects to protect both land and water. An example of past projects, recent projects, was the success of the Warren Brook campaign, in which we protected 191 acres at the east end of Lake Wentworth that affects the water quality of all of the systems in the town. And we were able to motivate 200 donors to join in this effort. Many of you are sitting right here. And that kind of conservation easement project is high on our list of efforts. If we can take a person's property and overlay a deed that protects it for conservation reasons, we're making very important steps. And most of you know that land trusts are doing this all over the United States, and it's a very exciting movement. At the other end of the spectrum, we're also working on the execution of the water management plan. And that targeted more than 100 sites in our watershed that needed attention. So we're beginning our work on those. Mass Landing is an example. Various projects that you'll be seeing completed this year where we're trying to make stormwater runoff filter effectively before it goes into the lake. So those are two things I might reference. Always we're trying to build relationships. Putting the two organizations back together again was a way for us to unify our efforts more. And we are daily working to try to improve our relationships with all the people who are here and all of you.
All right, so sort of got these grouped already into, we've got some themes emerging. I'm gonna start with this one because I think it's probably relevant to a lot of the folks in the room. I have a couple questions here about if you are a homeowner, what is the simplest thing that you can be doing to try to address this problem on your property? What's the first step that you should be taking? And also as sort of an addendum to that, what are the current laws regarding fertilizer use on lakeshore properties for homeowners? And we can go to whoever wants to take it, and then, you know.
Well, I'll take the first question, which is what can individual homeowners do? And all depends where you are located within the watershed. But clearly, the most important thing is if you see any type of erosion, whether it be a real erosion or maybe somewhere in your lawn you see after a rainstorm, you see some erosion occurring, or if there's any sediment leaving your property, that's because of all the things we're talking about, just on a mini level. And one of the things you could look at is for homeowners, at your drip edges, you could have infiltration trenches. You could have small rain gardens like we did at the demonstration project over at Bean Park, and where we have pictures out. Another thing you could do is along the if you're on lakefront, gardens that are using native vegetation and don't require fertilization, and also can create that buffer that we're looking for along the waterfront. Again, homeowners, there's a lot to do, and one of the things we are working at with one of our water quality grants, the 319 grant, is, to have education material so that we could develop these best management practices on small cards that you'd be able to take home and say, okay, this is how we do it. So almost like a how-to manual. They would be kind of standards that would be accepted by town. So that's kind of what you could do there.
Yeah, I mean, I think education and outreach from the town, it's maybe not what the homeowner can do, it's really what the town can do to make sure that homeowners are educated on these issues. So as Dave said, we're undertaking that right now. Relative to fertilizers and other materials within proximity to the water bodies, there are specific foot setbacks from water bodies that are in place. But additionally, as part of our permitting, and I think Dave has sort of been leading on this one, landscaping for water quality practices are being integrated as conditions of approval into a lot of the approvals that we're issuing, both on for private homeowners and other sites as well. But there are specific thresholds that are in place from the state that set back fertilizers from the water.
Can I ask really quickly, how are those enforced? Sorry.
There's an element here of sort of the code enforcement piece where our department is actually out there working with the homeowner and doing inspections, but also the state is involved. So really it's a partnership when it comes to enforcement even. We typically don't like to get to the stage in the process where perhaps an abutting landowner is making a complaint and we have an enforcement action then. We really want to be proactive in making the homeowner understand that they want to follow these rules to ensure that the property value that they have is maintained into the future. So there's a bit, we hope, in the future of self-enforcement as well.
I just wanted to add for the property owners, there is a resource on the Winnipesaukee Gateway website, and it's called What's Your P? And it's actually a stormwater footprint calculator. So similar to what's your carbon footprint, you can go in, and it's all based on the New Hampshire Homeowners Do-It-Yourself Stormwater Manual. But it's a great resource. It's not 100% accurate, but you could plug in all your impervious surfaces of your property, and then you can add in rain gardens or rain barrels or infiltration trenches, and it will calculate your reduction, your phosphorus reduction. So it's an interesting tool, and it gives you a lot of links there, so I recommend it.
I think you're not supposed to fertilize within 25 feet of the shorefront.
When we were setting up the Water Summit, one of our goals was to try to make sure that it didn't stop here. And we've already got our first follow-up program scheduled with a great help by the New Hampshire Boat Museum. And Kathy Neal is going to be speaking June 22nd at the Boat Museum, an event co-sponsored with our organization on landscaping near the water's edge. So this is going to really dig down into the very question that's been raised here today. So June 22nd at the Boat Museum.
So this is sort of a big question. What is the one big idea, the one big stroke that Wolfeboro could take to protect Lake Winnipesaukee, which most of these impervious surfaces are draining to? And there's a similar sort of related question here, which is the fact that a lot of these questions, especially with regards to Lake Winnipesaukee, the enforcement, the actions taken by other jurisdictions obviously impact the water quality there. So I'd say, if we're looking at Lake Winnipesaukee, what can Wolfeboro do? But also, I would add, what is beyond Wolfeboro's control?
It's kind of a history with regards to Wolfeboro and water pollution. People don't realize, but up until 1940, all our wastewater went right into the lake. All the pipes were plumbed in, and it wasn't until and at that time, in the 1930s, the state was saying, hey, wait, we're going to stop putting raw sewage into the lake. So they made a law that said no one can put in raw sewage into the lake, but Smith River wasn't considered part of the lake. Some of our good politicians back then said we couldn't, kind of had us restricted. So we delayed a few more years, and finally they said, you're going to build a treatment plant. We said, well, we don't want to spend the money. They finally sued us. They designed it, and they forced us to build it. So we started having first sewage treatment facility was not until the 1940s. But with that facility now, over 3 generations, we upgraded in the 70s, we upgraded in the 90s, and now, like I say, we've done some upgrades in the last decade that got us to the position where we have part of the cleanest effluent in the state. But the reality is we're paying for that. We're protecting that. So what's the one biggest thing we can do for stormwater? And this is what I've been pushing. And this is what I heard it kind of opened my eyes. I was at a conference, a national conference in Portland, Maine, and I think it was a community down in Texas where the University of Texas is Austin. They spend $800 million a year on water resources, just doing what we're talking about here, trying to restore their watersheds. They've been paving over for so many years, and they're spending about $100 per capita, which is because they got 1 million people there. So it's a lot of money when you look at it, but $100 per person. And if we did something like that in Wolfeboro with 6,000 people at $100 per person, that gives us $600,000 to go after these projects. Again, it's not one big project. We can't build one treatment plant to treat all the stormwater. We have to do 1,000 small projects. And again, as we're doing now, and I think the selectmen and the budget committee have been open to this, so we're slowly getting into it. We've identified some hot spots. But I think the biggest thing is, for us as a community, we need the volunteers, and I think we need as a town to create it as a department, a water resources department, in which we would be, our priority would be protecting that and making sure 100 years from now, the water quality is as good, if not better than it is now. That's my big pitch there.
Thanks, Dave. So yeah, Wolfeboro can do what they're doing. They can continue to improve what they're doing. Winnipesaukee has 8 shorefront towns. And watershed management planning, that's why we do focus on that, to at least raise the level of awareness at the municipal level of what they could do. There are regulations, land use planning, water quality monitoring, it's stormwater management, it's extensive. We're all contributing, and sometimes it's getting people to understand, if you're up in Wolfeboro Bay Inlet, it impacts what's happening down in the Broads, and sometimes people in Alton don't say, what does it matter what I do? But, you know, Paugus Bay receives everything. It's the where it outlets, Winnipesaukee. And we did this modeling as part of a management plan for Paugus Bay because the city of Laconia said, what can we do? We get everything from the rest of the lake, all the other towns. We have no control over really improving Paugus Bay. But we modeled it and we said, well, if you cut off Winnipesaukee's inflow there, Paugus Bay would actually be much worse in water quality. Right now, it's not a good thing, but Winnipesaukee kind of dilutes that effect. It runs through there and pushes everything out downstream. So it does matter what each town does, what each individual does. And so it's just keep doing it, improving it, and hopefully we'll get there.
Yeah, I'll just add, I mean, I hate to go back to the education issue, but I think, you know, a lot of the folks in the room today are not necessarily the folks that need the education on why water quality is so important. I think it, again, comes onto the town and also volunteers to sort of spread this message to property owners. And I hesitate to do this, but sometimes you have to bring in the tax implications that could result if, you know, water quality is not a concern. And, you know, for Wolfeboro, only 30% of our total land area is around our water bodies, but it's more than 60% of the total tax base here in town. I think it's near 65. And communicating what, you know, negative results when it comes to water quality could have, what the impact could be on that tax base, I think that's actually really critical when it comes to communicating these things to homeowners and property owners.
I think one of the things we really want to emphasize is the interconnection between land stewardship and water quality, that they are interconnected and that we aren't just working on invasives that are already in the water, but we are talking about how the water is filtered. And so that means we can start addressing questions to protect water by working on the land.
So this one goes to Pat first. How is the effort going to keep the Winnipesaukee Watershed Management Plan on track?
It's been going very well until maybe next year with the EPA funding cuts. So the Watershed Management Planning has been funded through these 319 grants that come from EPA and they come through the state. And we have successfully, since 2010, been able to obtain these grants to allow us to do this management planning. And as I mentioned before, we will be starting one for Wolfeboro Bay, which includes Tuftonboro, part of Wolfeboro, and Wolfeboro. the town of Tuftonboro passed at their March meeting, contributing $15,000 towards that plan. So the towns are starting to step up. We're finishing up Moultonboro. Moultonboro contributed $15,000 2 years ago to their plan. The future isn't looking good right now. It looks like it will come down to the local level. The towns are going to have to decide it's important and fund it themselves.
And on that front, and I apologize if this question's already been answered because I've been sort of sorting through the cards and not able to listen completely, but is there a plan in place for a Wolfeboro watershed management plan in terms of coming up with sort of a unified plan to answer all these questions?
It would sort of be Lake Winnipesaukee Association's next focus as we've been moving around the lake, and we've kind of done it as towns have been interested or whatever. But yeah, Wolfeboro, you've got Wentworth, the Mirror Lake, and whatever, Russ Pond. So yeah, the Winnipesaukee Front Bay, Back Bay, that needs to be done, Winter Harbor area. So,
does anyone else want to take a whack at that? Or
a lot of people in this room helped build the 2012 Wentworth Watershed Plan, and a great deal of Wolfeboro is within the watershed. The key question is, as Sam aptly put it, not that you have a watershed plan, it's whether or not you can use the watershed plan effectively to carry out the projects. And it involves a continual cycle of grant writing. And we have some wonderful people in our organization who have been doing this diligently, but it's going to continue, and it's going to require money and foresight. So all I can say is having a watershed plan is not enough. We need to pursue it aggressively. There's information on the table over there about the Wentworth Watershed Plan, and there are summaries that you can take with you. You can also see it on the website, and I hope you'll get interested in what it's attempting to do and get involved.
so I have a number, so Pat sort of teed this one up, and a number of people asked this question, but if we look at federal policies and cuts that have been proposed to federal programs, how does that trickle down, or how might that trickle down, given that the budget is not set yet, how might that trickle down to the local level?
In follow-up to what Bob was saying, implementation of these plans is key. It's no good having a plan if you don't implement it. And another source of the funding, it's been a sort of catch-22, but it makes sense. You need a plan in place in order to then go after some federal funding to do the big projects, get grant money to implement these. Because some are very expensive, and I think Wolfeboro's been successful in obtaining some of those grants, but I think that's the other area that we're going to see loss of funding for.
One of the tricks is that we have to be sure that Wolfeboro is identified as a place where if we have sought grants, that we successfully implement them. And there's a lot of pressure right now for us to implement programs into projects in 2017. And Dave is doing a wonderful job at making sure those things happen this year. But a lot of it also requires votes of townsfolk to support that with the budget.
Are there, for the folks, so Dan, for instance, are there impacts to monies for land conservation that you've been eyeing that you're thinking might be coming down the pike?
From the federal level, I don't think we've really seen any changes. We were very nicely supported by the town folk a few years ago when the use change tax was adopted, so that 100% of that tax comes to the Conservation Commission for land conservation efforts.
Gotcha.
It's a big source of funds, and it's great to have it there so that we can do what we need to do.
And I think that's why it's so critical to have these local conversations, so that in the event that the funding isn't available, that we have enough local support to actually continue the programs that we already have in place. I think doing this level of outreach is incredibly important in that.
So here's one on cyanobacteria. What cyanobacteria monitoring is being done on Wolfeboro Lakes, apart from Don going out and taking pictures whenever he sees a bloom?
As far as Lake Winnipesaukee is concerned, first of all, Lake Winnipesaukee is currently on that 303D list that was mentioned earlier for impairment for cyanobacteria. There is, I would say, none currently happening. Dawn and I have both been in touch with Dr. Haney at UNH to get involved in the cyanobacteria monitoring program, hopefully for this coming season. So that's where we are here.
Does anyone, this is a question from me, isn't it ALS that cyanobacteria has been linked to with recent science?
Linked to it.
Correlated with?
Yeah.
Okay. I guess I won't ask you to go there. Here's one. How much sanding and salting the roads is polluting? How much is that polluting the lakes? So can we talk about road salt, and is there any possibility of stopping or greatly reducing sanding and salting in some, as some communities have done?
Well, that's my question, and it's one that's you know, to be true. If you really want to see, if you go behind the Public Works garage on Pine Hill Road, you'll see a big pile of sand there, and that's the you know, equivalent of we put about 2,000 tons of sand on the road and about 1,000 tons of salt. We have reduced the amounts over the years because we're doing what we call more smart salting. We're trying to calibrate these spreaders to make sure we only salt in the road. That in the old days, the guys would just go off and not calibrate, they could be salting into the ditches, and all the snow is melting in the ditch, doesn't do any good. Salting is used to create a brine, and we try to get it down early so that the snow doesn't pack. We've cut back on our sand quite a bit on our paved roads, and because of the, we feel that and we use magnesium chloride with our rock salt, which is a little bit more environmentally friendly. But the problem is we have risen, I believe, our level of service on our paved roads with plowing that people expect within a short period of time to see black pavement. So we've delivered that service, and that's our goal. Every storm, you don't go home until we've broken up that ice and slush, and it takes a lot of salt and the sand. So we do train our operators. We have had to train over the last couple of years, but our operators do go to what they call a Green Pro training, so they understand what they're trying to do. But it is it's, you know, you're balancing public safety with the environment. And that's what we get. As we move forward, we've got to do a better job ourselves as Public Works Department in terms of maintaining our equipment and trying to be smart. But it is a difficult situation. The first answer, yes, obviously there's impact. The one thing that we should say that we're in southern part of the state, you have impaired waters because of chloride. We don't have that up here, even though you know, it looks bad, and I'm the first to say there's quite a bit going down, but our levels of chlorides in the water bodies is not at a chronic where it's hurting, but it's something, again, we do have to be careful, and that's why, again, a lot of our parking lots, which we are, again, taking the lead on that, trying to get, you know, because we also salt and sand the parking lots, try to get that into a treatment system, which is what we're doing at Mass Landing now, and that's going to be another good demonstration project. So it is a big issue, and it's something we are working on, and it's definitely a source of concern.
We had a question about Mass Landing as well, in terms of what sort of best management practices are being used there. Can we talk about sort of concrete examples of how Mass Landing is different from perhaps development that's been done in the past?
Well, yeah, absolutely. This goes back to what I talked about, the transformation. In the old days, it was just, let's get the road surface or the pavement corrected. We'll go ahead and reclaim it, and we'll get a good base, and get the drain pipe directly into the lake. Well, here we've done considerable changes. We have a lot of water that's sheet flowing right down the boat ramp and into the lake. So at the edge of the water back, we've put in these blocks, 9 by 9 inch blocks, the heavy duty blocks, and underneath it, it has a filtering material of different sizes of stone, and that allows the water to go right down in between the blocks into the stone and get filtered, and then it has an under drain out towards another treatment system so that we're treating that water there. Another part of the parking lot, we're going to use this porous pavement in an area where we'll be doing the boat trailer parking, and that's something new. Again, it has been used in town. Like there was a picture Don showed up at the high school, and at the we also did another parking lot at the Village Savings Bank, Merritt Village Savings Banks. We have rain gardens, and then another one that's been successful we're doing on some of our road projects is an infiltration trench. So in the upper lot, where the water goes into a catch basin, it then ties to another catch basin. In between, the pipe is going to be perforated with stone in it. So that allows the water to soak into the ground before it gets to the outlet of the pipe. So it gives another chance to go into the ground naturally and again, to get that treatment. And it's the type of system we're using now in Port Wetland and Winter Haven. We're doing an upgrade there now. We're trying to mitigate the peak runoffs going down the hill. So we're using those infiltration type trenches. So it's kind of a new standard we're using in our drainage with road construction.
I just wanted to add one thing. I mean, the Public Works Department is well trained in the operations and maintenance of a lot of these green infrastructure, low impact development techniques. I know Tom had mentioned this. You know, we require a lot of these things of property owners and developers, and fortunately in Wolfeboro, our stormwater management regulations actually require that applicants prepare an operations and maintenance plan that certifies that they will continue to keep these systems in operation. So that's one way that I think we've been a bit progressive, ensuring that these things will be really effective in the long term as well.
I'm going to try to synthesize a couple questions that I had that about stormwater. If we're looking out into the future in terms of turnover of our infrastructure and changing from this sort of drain straight to the lake mindset to sort of detain, slow down, infiltrate, how long do you think it will take at our current rate before that's the infrastructure you see basically everywhere?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question. If people are interested, Wednesday night we're going to be discussing our asset management plan. So the Board of Selectmen have been pushing me for 10 years. I've been here 10 years back, and that was one of the things. We need to have this long-term planning. And I keep telling them I'm in a crisis management. Every year is a crisis. I can't seem to get out of it. But really, it's not. We're doing one-year planning, and we're doing pretty good. We have been moving to a lot of capital reserve accounts, and we have been doing better rebuilding of the infrastructure. But on the water system alone, just because we have done a lot there, we looked out at the 100 years, and our capital needs over 100 years is $89 million, and that would replace pretty much everything we have. So Wednesday night, and it's a topic upon itself, we'll have a nice presentation and explain what's just going on with a water distribution system and treatment system. With regards to roads, we are not there yet. We are going to be proposing that, and we discussed Wednesday night, and we have had a lot of discussion about that recently with a roads forum and other concerned citizens making good constructive criticisms of what we've been doing and looking long-term planning. But I would say that we'll probably be looking at 20 years, a good generation to make the major impacts, but we've got to make it a priority. I think if we can speed it up. I had made recommendations last year about hiring on a full-time water resources engineer who would help implement that, and then kind of starting to make it a priority by putting more money in. But it can be done, and it is being done just like we're doing now with projects we're doing, like the Mass Landing. Normally, that parking lot maybe would have been a little less expensive, but we were able to get the support, and largely because of the Lake Wentworth Association, and the Budget Committee understands the importance of that, so we were able to put in those extras. Next year, we're going to be looking at the dockside parking lot, and we had some good public meetings. We talked about making it more pedestrian-friendly and more of a... but we had some other things that's still going to be functional. We can't give up parking spots, and so we're trying to balance how do we, make that functional as a parking lot, but also provide some stormwater treatment. So that'll be our next project next year, but going forward with regards to the massive thing, I think it's going to be a long-term effort, and again, it's going to take a long-term commitment.
So really, I think we need to put the question back to you, because one of the wonderful things about living in a democracy is that truthfully, the work that Dave does is decided by all of you. We have to decide how important it is to us to spend money, part of your budget, on this kind of work. Many of you are very generous. You give to organizations like ours. You get involved. You give your time. But as a community, the question will be, how high a priority is that? Are we willing to give up dinners out and other luxuries in order to have a better quality of life for our children and in the years ahead? I don't think it has to take that long. We can all change our mind about what our priorities are.
And I would just add, when it comes to the planning side of things, a lot of the regulations don't actually cost the taxpayers money immediately, but when it comes to things that will support, regulations that will support improved water quality, you have a chance when you enter the ballot box to cast a vote in favor of a change in regulation or a zoning ordinance. And I think that as well is an opportunity for you to show your support for a lot of the issues that we're talking about today.
I don't have a question about this in front of me, but as we're getting close to the time that we're supposed to wrap up, I want to sneak it in there. stay small was one of the solutions that Don had at the end of his slideshow, which would imply restricting the amount of development that's happening, either through land conservation or through zoning changes. Is that part? I mean, obviously, land conservation is happening, but maybe we could just talk about that. Is that part of the conversation, and how is it part of the conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start this one off. I mean, I think it certainly is a part of the conversation, and again, I think our regulations reflect that. And one plug I'll make is that we're approaching a comprehensive master planning process right now within the community, and I think that the more definition will be provided to the answer to that question through that master plan process, and we actually have a better understanding of what the community's priorities are. But certainly, when it comes to our zoning ordinance and our regulations, they do emphasize staying smaller, and at least if you're going to not be so small, how you can mitigate your impact to the environment. So I think, that's supported through our regulations.
I was just going to speak to the larger picture of Winnipesaukee. There are towns that want development around Winnipesaukee. There are towns that don't. They express that they want to keep that rural character and feeling and that it's important to them, but then on the other hand, they do want the tax base. So for Winnipesaukee, it's a challenge because some towns are small with limited resources. Other towns have a lot of money and can do things better. But we're trying to promote, if you want development, do it the right way. That you can have it, low impact, and the least negative impact to our water resources.
I think one of the things that we really have to be careful about is considering short-term economic gain versus long-term economic gain. And we have to keep widening the view, because if it's tempting to think that we add businesses that we are necessarily in the long run going to be better off economically, or that we build and that will help us. We have to be very thoughtful about the long-term implications of development.
So I have two questions which I know nothing about. Do the tanker trucks that fill up from Lake Wentworth pay some sort of registration fee? And if so, does the fee go towards maintaining the health of the lake? And I think this one's related, but I'm not sure, but it's what are the consequences of pulling water out of the lakes for use, not a well or municipal water source?
The first question, I don't, if a 9,000 gallon is quite a bit of water, so if a tanker truck is filling up I'm not sure that's happening, and I'm assuming someone saw something that, normally if you're filling up a pool, you're going to go get water from a municipal system, and it doesn't, 9,000 gallons seems like a lot, but if you're filling a pool, you probably want to get clean water to start with, and if you bring in lake water, you're going to be bringing in things you might have to be treating for, so I'm not aware, and I don't know what the regulations are with regards to that. The other question was about withdrawals. That is something that's a great concern, as we talked about, whether it's a small withdrawal for a camp, for using a camp is not a big deal, but if a golf course comes and takes millions of gallons a day for irrigation, that's a concern. That has to be going through a whole process now. So the state does monitor withdrawals, and they would have to go through rigorous engineering studies before anything major would be allowed.
All right, folks, so we've hit the time that we're supposed to wrap things up, so I think I'm going to leave it there. If I didn't get to your question, I apologize. Maybe you can sort of drag one of these folks off to the side on the sideline, but thank you very much for coming, showing up on this beautiful Saturday morning, and give them all a round of applause. Oh, excuse me. Sorry, Bob has been waiting.
I'm going to make a few closing remarks for the Wentworth Watershed Association. First of all, it doesn't stop here, and it's really important that we not allow it to stop here. On the way out, there's a suggestion box. If you've thought of things or have comments to make, we hope to have Watershed Summit #2 next year. Remember that the first follow-up program is June 22nd at the Boat Museum. And please contact me. Our information is over there if you want to get involved through our nonprofit in doing this work. Thank you for being here.